Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Just before we start, I want to really commend Wolf Blitzer and the Situation Room team on yesterday's interview with Nancy Pelosi, which I think was a hallmark of what we can and what we should do. It was really excellent, and for those of you who did not see it, I would highly recommend that you take a look. Obviously, a lot going on, but I continue to believe that the focus is the resurgent coronavirus. And so with that, I want to start with Matthew.
Good morning, Jeff. So I think the CNN map says it all. There is no green there, no region escaping the surge right now. All the key indicators keep going in the wrong direction, that is to say up. Specifically, the CNN map currently has 0 states down in new cases week to week, 36 up, 14 holding steady, but at a high place, as the U.S. closes in on 8 million cases and is at 216,000 deaths. The average of new daily cases, the main measure we look at, is now above 50,000. It's about 51,000. So that's the highest average in 2 months. And there's renewed concern about more overwhelmed hospitals coming as hospitalizations hit the highest in almost 2 months. And then on treatments and vaccines, still few details on the pauses. What caused Lilly's pause of the antibody treatment trial? Was it a side effect or just someone sick in the testing population? What will this mean for the Regeneron decision on that treatment? And how long will Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca's trial pauses last? All this, as scientists and doctors, the vast majority of them, express alarm at reports the White House is more fully embracing this maverick science herd immunity strategy. William Haseltine on New Day this morning saying this is an unmitigated disaster. In this case, there's no such thing as herd immunity, and that herd immunity would be another term for mass murder. As we look at the key regions around the country, Fauci telling researchers that increasing positivity rates in several regions suggest more case increases are coming. One of the regions with rising positivity rates is Iowa, where Trump holds that rally tonight. Iowa's positivity rate surging to near 20%, the state now at record hospitalizations and almost back up at record new cases. On our map, the highest week-to-week increases right now are Montana, South Dakota, and New Mexico. It's definitely the Midwest and Western states seeing some of the sharpest increases driving the overall surge. Utah's governor says his state has one of the worst outbreaks in the country, that hospitals there are precariously close to being unable to treat critical COVID patients. Wisconsin opens a field hospital this morning at the state fairgrounds for up to 500 patients who need hospital care but aren't critically ill. Hospitalizations in Wisconsin have nearly tripled there in the last month, and we have Adrian brought us at that location in Wisconsin. In Colorado, Denver's mayor says residents could face new restrictions if infections continue to rise, and we've got Lucy in Denver. In New York, still lots of enforcement and restrictions going on. There's, of course, this tale of the Long Island venue fined after 29 guests got sick at a Sweet 16 party, 8 schools showing up with cases connected to that party, Alexandra Field in New York. And then in Florida, case numbers are rising just slightly 3 weeks after the state's full-blown reopening of businesses and restaurants and bars. So we're watching that carefully still. New from the health team this morning. 3 new reports that just published that show coronavirus immunity can last for months, maybe even longer. The findings suggest that people who recover are protected for at least a period of time in most cases, and that vaccines may be able to protect people for a longer haul. One study saying 5 to 7 months. And then on the always talked about topic of COVID and blood type, at noon, we'll see 2 studies that add to the thinking that those with blood type O might have a slightly lower risk of infection. It's not a big difference, and the studies say much more research is needed. Interesting just the same, studies releasing at noon. And then the CDC director telling states that small family gatherings are becoming a growing source of the spread. So this is the pre-holiday season warning from the CDC. We've got Sanjay and Elizabeth and Jacqueline available from the health team. On education, the message at this hour at a briefing from the Infectious Disease Society of America is that it's the behavior of the community that can ultimately dictate when all children get back to school safely. Experts there briefing now pointing out that there are still significant gaps in nationalized data when it comes to schools, as CNN has reported, and things continue to pop up around the country, with Michigan reporting 26 schools have new outbreaks in the public education system in Michigan, and we've got Biana and Evan McMorris Santoro splitting the day on the education lines. When it comes to COVID and sports and culture, University of Florida pausing all football activity after 19 reported positive tests, putting the Florida LSU game in jeopardy. The Eagles will allow fans for the first time this Sunday, and the Saints are looking to play in Baton Rouge instead of New Orleans in order to have fans. We obviously had some fans this week for the NLCS in baseball, and then the New York Philharmonic cancels the entire season for the first time in history. And then also just drawing attention to the Miguel Marquez piece for EBOF tonight, a very personal story of a Phoenix family struggle. A man lost 7 family members. He's sick. His pregnant wife is sick. 2 kids were sick. No health insurance. Catering job lost. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills, putting a face on the suffering there. And we've got the wrap piece, which today is Nick Watt for 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. And I'll hold it there.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Let's move to politics, please.
Good morning, Jeff. We've got 20 days to go until Election Day, and we now have these dueling town halls scheduled tomorrow night in place of the second presidential debate. Just to remind folks, that debate was indeed scheduled to be a town hall style debate, and that is what each candidate will be doing separately in battleground states tomorrow evening on dueling networks, Biden on ABC and Trump on NBC. You'll note that Virginia may have more on this. In terms of the president's health, what was required by NBC in order to get assurances from outside the White House at NIH, and having Fauci observe and comment that it is likely, highly likely, that he is no longer infectious and not shedding the virus. Hence, NBC felt okay to proceed. Remember, again, the whole reason that tomorrow night's debate was canceled is the president pulled out of what the CPD said would have to be a debate where the candidates would appear remotely, and he would not do that. I still think, and I know Virginia will have a lot more on this, I still think like the biggest story in the campaign right now today are these voting lines and people showing up in record numbers to cast their ballots. All of this early voting going on. Obviously, it is both pandemic related, with a big push for people to vote early. But as all voting can be, it is also a potential sign of enthusiasm that exists on the ground for folks to participate, especially when we see this kind of record numbers compared to what we were seeing at this point 4 years ago. So I do think that that is critical that we continue, obviously, as we are, to stay on top of. Just to note the reporting that Arlette Saenz and Jeff Zeleny had out last night about Barack Obama and his plans for the final couple of weeks in this campaign season. He is going to be out and about on the campaign trail. We will see him. Obviously, it'll be done in a socially distant and COVID-safe kind of a way. The Biden campaign believes he could be most helpful with African-American men, Latinos, and young people. So be on the lookout to see when his public events are announced what, how that strategic positioning of Obama plays out in those events. I thought if you looked yesterday evening at both candidates, sort of the public slicing and dicing of the electorate that they are doing is really interesting. I mean, Biden in Florida standing behind a sign that says "Seniors for Biden," and talking to seniors there saying, have you been able to hug your grandkids in the last 7 months? While Donald Trump in Pennsylvania is literally calling out to suburban women saying, please like me. You just see clearly each sort of micro slice of the electorate that these campaigns are targeting their messages for in the closing days. Obviously, we're not going with the New York Post story right now on Hunter Biden, and which seems to be giving its marching orders to Fox News and the right-wing echo chamber about what to talk about today. But Arlette does have inquiries into the campaign who right now are not engaging in this or offering any kind of statement. Obviously, Hunter Biden's lawyer is quoted in that New York Post piece, and we'll just continue to report out. This is the very stuff that the president was impeached over. This is the stuff that Senate committees looked at and found nothing wrong in Joe Biden's interactions with Ukrainians, and now having an email that perhaps there was a meeting with someone from Burisma is it seems Rudy Giuliani's sort of dream-a-vision of how to throw stuff at the wall in these closing days of the campaign. I do also think, though, it is a reminder just what a different political environment we're in and how you could imagine a story like this would have had a totally different kind of life absent all things Trump and COVID, and a frontrunner like Biden would be batting away constant stories like this in a way that he just doesn't appear to have to do in this environment and where he is right now. So we'll let you know more if the Biden campaign has any reaction to that. We don't see Joe Biden today. He's got pre-taped remarks to Muslim Americans that'll roll out at 7 p.m. Eastern. He's got a virtual fundraiser, but he is spending most of his day, I suspect, prepping for that ABC town hall tomorrow night. And I think that is where we start.
Thank you, David. Washington.
Okay, so I'll start with Trump and COVID. As David mentioned, there was this, NBC did require this independent review of Trump's health with Fauci and NIH saying that he is no longer spreading the virus, which gave them the comfort to go ahead with this. There was this call with governors yesterday where this whole White House pushing herd immunity came up with senior administration officials claiming that Trump's approach was vindicated by the WHO and health experts, and this whole Great Barrington Declaration, which essentially advocates herd immunity, protects the vulnerable, just showing again how the White House is, not acknowledging what's really going on out there. Meanwhile, COVID cases continue from that White House event. Eugene Scalia's wife, who was sitting next to Kellyanne Conway, we learned last night, tested positive. And then on the stimulus, you mentioned the Pelosi interview, Senate Republicans moving forward with a targeted bill, Pelosi not buying it, and clearly the pressure of all of this being seen yesterday with Wolf when she was questioned about why they wouldn't do this $1.8 trillion package. Trump, for his part, weighing in on this, saying go big or go home, and the stimulus package is not going anywhere fast. On Barr, he had his first public appearance today with these two major developments out there. First of all, the review of the unmasking that we've heard so much from Trump about and Fox News about over these past few years, closed out with no significant findings and no announcement of its end, despite a very public announcement of its start. This comes just days after we learned that the Durham probe would not be coming out pre-election. And of course, as Michael has pointed out, we still have heard no word from our chief law enforcement officer on this plot to kill two Democratic governors. So whether we hear any of that today, we will see. On voting, as David mentioned, huge lines. We have Ed in Texas and Amara in Georgia, over 10 million ballots cast. In Ohio, in-person voting tripled in this first week compared to 2016. Catalyst data showing that Black voters account for a larger share than last time. And then, of course, we have all these just problems with voting. This one in Virginia yesterday on the last day of voter registration, everything crashed due to a cable being accidentally severed, and so now they're going to court to see if they can extend that deadline. On Amy Coney Barrett, those hearings continue today. Questions as to whether she'll try to clean up her wishy-washy on this peaceful transfer of power. Everything else she seems to have handled, quite smoothly. And she will move to a vote next week. It's also important to note that the Democrats have been really uncharacteristically strategic about keeping the focus on the ACA, and Kamala Harris yesterday just being a good example of that. And then just two notes from the Supreme Court. Trump has gone back to stop New York investigators from getting his taxes. And the Supreme Court also granted this request from the Trump administration to halt the census count while the appeals plays out in lower courts. And that's where we stand.
Okay, let's open up the thoughts on COVID, Trump, White House politics, anything people want to talk about.
Hey, Jeff, it's just David on the Burisma story, and we should be awfully careful about that, obviously. But I do think there's a media story of what in the world are Maggie Haberman and Jake Sherman doing retweeting that story.
Okay, other thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to ask, are we trying to report it out? The guidance right now is not to do anything, not to report anything, not to tweet anything until CNN gets its own reporting on this issue and cleared through the triad.
We are. I think the genesis of this is obviously questionable given where it's coming from, but we are definitely trying to report it out and just until we get a better handle on it.
Thanks.
I just also want to point out the sort of whole birth story of that story seems really odd and unlikely. I mean, we have a story coming from investigative about Bannon creating an entire COVID thing that caught on online and then in the media that was all completely made up, like completely fake. So I have a really hard time believing that there's anything real on this story.
Okay. So, look, here's the deal. We should report it out on our own, see what we can find. We should not go to air or report any of it until we do that. Not that we would, obviously. But I think that if the unmasking story teaches us anything, it's just because Fox News and Sean Hannity and John Solomon and Sarah Carter on Fox News bark about unmasking and Donald Trump picks it up and retweets it, and the New York Post then goes with it. If any of that proves to us that we should not be playing that game, the unmasking story does. And so we should absolutely try to report this out, see what we can find, but we should be very careful and very dubious of picking up anything like this without a complete and thorough vetting. And I understand that's exactly what we do, so I'm not suggesting otherwise. But I go back to the unmasking story, and I believe this is a significant story today because of all the time that has been spent on by the President of the United States suggesting that people were going to be arrested for all of the illegal activity, and then for us not to follow up now that it's complete and utter bullshit is wrong. So I want to be doing the unmasking story, and I want to be very careful on the Burisma story.
Can I add two things on unmasking? First of all, I think it's really important for us to go back and bring all that together. Like, count how many times Trump tweeted about unmasking. Pull the clips from Hannity. Pull the stuff from Sarah Carter. Because I don't think most people who are like passive media, who like they don't know, they don't realize the extent to which this has fueled like endless hours and endless amounts of social media speculation. So I think for us to show the significance of what happened, what we learned last night. We have to show what has happened over the last couple of years with that whole narrative. And then the second thing is, I think we have to put it again in context to all the other completely bullshit things that they've asked the Justice Department to do, with adding to that list yesterday of going after Stephanie Wolkoff's book, like, and just paint the bigger picture and make unmasking just the cherry on top.
So I could not agree more with Rebecca, and I am very, very committed to making sure we do this today, to what Rebecca just laid out. Because,
hey, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
I want to do this in a significant way. I want to do this in a significant way, and I will be following up with every show after this call to see what we're doing on it. Okay? And I will be following up with Washington to see what reporters are assigned to do it, and with digital to see how we're handling it on digital. I am very serious about this. Go ahead, Michael.
I just wanted to add, Rebecca took a lot of words right out of my mouth, and you're seconding that. I just want to add, I think one of the problems here in terms of how we see this is the word unmasking, and that's the headline, like unmasking case shows there's no report and no whatever. You have to stretch it out to say that the president accused President Obama, literally President Obama, but also his team, of spying on his campaign. He said that the president of the United States, the former president, should be arrested, that his opponent in this election, the former vice president of the United States, should be arrested. He called out on Bill Barr in an interview or somewhere last week or 2 weeks ago that if they're not arrested, then Barr's in trouble or isn't doing his job. I'm very disappointed with him that he hasn't arrested them already. I think he used words like treason. I think you have to stretch it out just beyond unmasking and Rebecca used the word context. That's the really key thing. The headline really shouldn't be unmasking no report. It should be the president's allegations of treason against the former administration and spying on his campaign, and then doing all these sort of super secret, horrible things behind the scenes to facilitate all of that, et cetera, is all BS. No, nothing to see here. I just think we can't get stuck just with the word unmasking. First of all, people have no idea what that is. You have to really explain it. It should be part of the story, but I think the headline and the face of it should be a much bigger, broader context of what this was. Don't just focus on the unmasking investigation, because then people are like, what? I don't know what that is. So that's just my advice, is to have somebody, as Rebecca said, bring all of the pieces of it together. All the times the president attacked them, all the times he accused them of treason and spying and all these things. Bill Barr used the word spying, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing to see here on all of that.
Okay, the Washington Bureau informs me that no show has asked for a story on unmasking. So I'll leave it to each of the shows to fix that in the coming minutes. Other thoughts? Okay, I think a couple additional stories that I think we should be focused on that is related to what we were just talking about. And Virginia said, I think there's 2 Bill Barr appearances today publicly. Is that right?
The big one's this morning. I don't know about the second one.
Okay. So the question is, where is Bill Barr on all of this? He said nothing about this. He said nothing about the 2 kidnapping plots. Where is Bill Barr? And I think we need to follow up on that. Obama is doing his first thing today for Biden with the Pod Save America podcast. We need to pay attention to that. And I'm interested in a story, certainly maybe an opinion piece for digital. Maybe it's best for Smirkanish this weekend. But, you know, what we've seen on display, whether or not there should be an age limit for political office, certainly for Congress. You know, we see Pelosi yesterday, we see Grassley, Leahy, Feinstein. You know, we've got 2 almost 75-year-old pluses running for president. I do think there's a conversation about whether or not there should be an age limit. Grassley, Leahy, Feinstein, and Pelosi are all over 80. And I do think that it would be an interesting conversation. I do think that the voting lines that Virginia brought up in record numbers is an enormous story today. Any other thoughts?
Jeff, just as the president goes to Iowa, remember 22% positivity rate. We can't be numb to the pictures of these massive events with people not wearing masks. The pictures tell the whole story, especially in a state like Iowa.
Yep.
Jeff, one additional note on the voting lines too. Again, huge story. Totally agree, as you know. And I think walking the line and talking to people is really important. The one thing we have to make sure we do, though, is don't just make the voting line story like a voting issue story. There are certainly concerns about voter suppression by creating these the narrowing of the number of places you can go, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also an energy story and an enthusiasm story from both sides, not just one party or the other. People are voting like crazy. People are sending in ballots like crazy. I know the number's over 10 million, maybe it's over 11 million now that have been mailed in. And people are voting in these, waiting 6, 7, 8 hours in line, in October to vote. And I think we need to get sound from these people on the lines, again, whoever they're supporting, why they're there, why they're willing to wait, what is it about this election that has caused them to take a day off from work or from spending it with their family or whatever they're doing to wait 2, 3, 4 hours in line to vote in October.
So I totally agree. And again, I would recommend Jessica Houston on this, our voting analyst, who believes it is all about enthusiasm, and that is actually the right way to look at this. Anyone else? Matthew, the rest of domestic, please.
Just a couple of things. The Breonna Taylor case, the ongoing interest here, this highly detailed interview with her boyfriend on CBS this morning, talking about that fateful night and about the controversial grand jury decision, saying he never thought it was the police knocking, didn't even know what happened after the gunshot, says that when he told an officer he wasn't hit, the officer said, that's unfortunate, and that he was dragged in his bare feet down the street. Later at headquarters told, quote, this was a misunderstanding, we're going to get to the bottom of it. That he was never told Breonna didn't make it, and he heard it on the news and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. We're, of course, still awaiting these rulings on the bids from these anonymous grand jurors, either to talk publicly or to get more grand jury transcript information released. And then in the wake of the Breonna Taylor case, the fact that no-knock raids around the country are going away in city after city. The policing beats reporting on this. Ray Sanchez has filed for digital already, and Josh Campbell available for TV on that. And then the only other thing, just drawing attention to Ralph Northam's interview with New Day after the revelation that this group in Michigan was targeting not only Whitmer, but allegedly him, saying the president is emboldening individuals, these white supremacists, he says. And that is it.
Okay, thank you. International.
Hey, everyone. So we'll cover all the U.S. lines mentioned. For us, it's mostly COVID overseas. In the U.K., a new debate emerging, the opposition now calling for a short-term national lockdown, adding support to what scientists had originally recommended. Boris Johnson's regional lockdown system, though, takes effect today. And Liverpool, which is the U.K. COVID hotspot, begins strict new measures after their last one big party scene last night. So Salma is live from Liverpool with all that this morning. Today in Germany, Merkel meets with her state leaders to strategize on their sharp rise in infections, and the number of patients in intensive care units in Paris is rising. So we have Melissa and Scott on those lines. We also have a wider Euro rat package from Cyril. Russia set another record in highest daily increases. 90% of hospital beds right now in Russia are for COVID patients, and the situation is tense. Remember, this comes after all their talk of vaccine progress. So we've got Fred Pleiken in Moscow to let us know what's going on there. The city in China trying to contain a cluster tested more than 8 million people in 3 days. Christie speaks to an expert, though, who says that this so-called batch testing is a waste of time. It's inefficient, this idea of taking samples from 10 people at a time. And can these numbers actually be trusted? So David Culver has that. Matt Rivers is on the Japanese tourist stranded in Peru because of COVID who finally got his tour of Machu Picchu. And Mexican authorities also are prepaying pharma companies to guarantee vaccines for all their citizens. And then just lastly, Quest wrote this story for Digital on how his antibodies are waning after getting COVID months ago. So just to let shows know he is in today if anyone's interested in speaking to him. And that's where we start.
Okay, thank you. Business?
Jeff, good morning. Investors shrugging off that delay in the COVID-19 vaccine trial from Eli Lilly that Matthew mentioned, focusing on bank earnings today. Bank of America coming in worse than expected, but Goldman Sachs blowing it out of the park based on bond trading and asset management. And of course, we're watching United Airlines coming in after the bell, clearly this coming a day after Delta posting a $5.4 billion loss, raising new concerns about the airline industry. Allison Kosik is up and available on all of those threads. Late yesterday, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon warning of a double-dip recession and addressing Washington's failure to reach a stimulus deal, saying a decent stimulus package would be helpful. Fed Vice Chair Clarita moments ago in a speech echoing that sentiment, saying that the U.S. has seen a surprisingly robust bounce back, but more stimulus, of course, is needed. But as Phil notes this morning, the deal is still dead. And of course, that amazing interview with House Speaker Pelosi and Wolf yesterday, still making headlines this morning. The Hill team is up all over those threads. And in non-COVID news, Facebook announcing late yesterday that it will no longer allow ads that discourage people from getting vaccines. Of course, anti-vaccine misinformation has run rampant on the platform for years. We are tracking that. And we're also watching misinformation before the election, specifically in Florida's Latino community, which make up 20% of the electorate. Conspiracies pushed by QAnon have taken aim at candidates and have gone through Spanish language radio and have been seen on popular messaging apps like WhatsApp. Leila Santiago has a fantastic piece that's going to release on the lead today on that. And that is where we begin.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Is there anything else in Washington?
No.
Okay. So before we move to digital, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up? Digital.
29 million uniques yesterday. The Barrett DLE and the top 10 Senate seats that could flip were the resounding number ones. And the top video yesterday was Vanna Bash on Barrett's empty notepad moment. This morning, the sheriff that spoke in defense of the accused domestic terrorists in the plot targeting Governor Whitmer is number one. That is 10,000 concurrents. Thank you, Sarah Seidner. And then it's rare that just a standalone video is in the top five, but we have that this morning with Wolf and Pelosi. And that was actually number one overnight. Now it's a strong number two this morning. Another top video I should mention that's in the top 10 is Mary Trump on with Don last night. That's doing really well too. What else this morning that is doing well? The small household gatherings that are helping drive the surge of U.S. cases. So that's our COVID main bar. The trash bags of undelivered mail found outside a postal worker's home in Pennsylvania. And then Collinson on determined voters are enduring long lines in this historic election. So he backs out on voting for a lot of the conversations that we've been having this morning and yesterday. And then he does also call out in that piece in the third graph that another one of the president's many misinformation efforts is claimed that the Obama administration spied on his team suffered a massive blow. And then we do have a separate on that as well, just calling out the Post reporting and how Republicans have been hyping this for months and it fell flat. So we will stay on that, more to come. Trump and Biden participating in competing town halls. That news is a strong performer this morning in and around the top five. And then lastly, still the Amazon Prime Day best deals from Underscored. Audiences are really interested in that. The Barrett DLE is up again. We're live streaming again. And we've got just a long list of really good stories, analysis in the rundown, like Joan Biskupic, the art of the dodge. Barrett's 11 hours in the Senate hot seat yesterday. Super smart. And then on voting, again, just a really good package. Republicans are injecting new chaos into the election with those unauthorized drop boxes in California. Zach Wolf wraps up all the problems so far around registration glitches, like what we saw in Virginia, and the long lines and all of that in one piece. Brian Fung has his good piece on ransomware and the election and how worried you should be. And then there's kind of a nice just service utility piece from Faith Karimi on what not to wear to the polls, given the restrictions in many states on campaign materials. Stelter is super sharp today in the newsletter that is also just a standing story on our site on how Trump has thrived in the attention economy, but now that's hitting its limits. The more is more tactic that worked in 2016 just isn't working that well this time around. It's not drawing as many eyeballs. The whole shtick about repeating the same lie about CNN's camera light going off when he insults CNN. It's a lie. He's been doing it for years. And those lines are just getting tired and boring. And it's obviously a contrast to Biden's far smaller media footprint. So it's just a really sharp analysis that's doing well. We're playing up. On COVID, Matthew mentioned the Marquez and team story coming on the Arizona family that lost 7 relatives and now their business is on the brink. Penny mentioned the personal essay from Quest. It's very good. The headline is, "After recovering from COVID, I thought I was safe, but now my antibodies are waning." And then 2 last things. I mentioned yesterday we launched the Misinformation Watch blog in business. You can find it at cnn.com/misinformation. The top item this morning is Facebook now saying it will stop allowing ads that discourage vaccines. But once again, they're just kind of swapping back and forth on these issues that are really important and impact health and lives. And then lastly, on climate, the Great Barrier Reef has lost half its corals within 3 decades, and we have that. I'll stop there. That's it.
Thank you very much, John.
So we have coronavirus in the top position, no states on the decline. Elizabeth Cohen will handle that. She'll take a look at the broader view of the national trends. And then John Harwood and Caitlin Collins with this really troublesome push for herd immunity. Plenty of medical voices to do a reality check on the dangers of that. We are out across the country today. Adrian brought us on the Wisconsin Field Hospital because of the rising cases there. Lucy Kaffenoff on Denver's mayor potentially imposing new restrictions. Alexandra Field on that big super spreader event at the Sweet 16 in Long Island and the big fines because of that. We'll work in the fact that now the University of Florida football team has been hit hard with COVID, just as the coach there was pushing to get 90,000 people in the stadium in Gainesville. We do have Denver's mayor, Ahmed John King. We also have a local health commissioner from Michigan's Upper Peninsula. There was a big men's retreat super spreader event, and the men who are part of that are being openly hostile to the contact tracers. Plus international whips from Melissa Bell and Fred Pleiken on Europe's second wave and Dave Culver on the mass testing in China. Also, we're going to stay on the stimulus story. We do have Ro Khanna booked with Poppy and Jim next hour. Obviously, a lot to discuss after that Pelosi interview with Wolf yesterday, which will be playing out big chunks of throughout the day. All shows are going to do the long lines. Just had Amara Walker up in Atlanta talking to some of those waiting in those long lines to vote. At Lavendera in Allen, Texas, Kirsten Holmes doing the step back on the voting issues. Arlette Saenz, Dana Bash, and Joe Seleny on on where the candidates are campaigning, who they're targeting, and the Obama factor. We do have the head of Florida's AARP chapter, Ahmed Brianna, on the big appeal to senior voters with that key constituency in Florida. On the DOJ story that we were just discussing, Jessica Schneider is going to take the lead on that. Josh Campbell just put some interesting observations out there, so we're going to look to get him in the mix, doing a big mashup of all the times that Trump and Fox put this in the echo chamber. Andy McCabe, Mary Kate Carey, and Donald Ayer on the bar angle, and we'll also look to do the media angle as well.
Okay, thank you. Washington?
Good morning. So on the lead at 3 o'clock, we've got Nick Watt with his coronavirus wrap piece. Dr. Shisha Jha, Caitlin Collins, of course, live from the White House. We will get unmasking in there as well, and we have a piece with Mark Court at 4. Layla has that piece on Latinos and misinformation campaign that Richard mentioned. And if we can fit him in, we got Dr. William Schaffner as well. And then at 4 o'clock, Sanjay, Caitlin has a package, and then Pamela Brown, of course, has her voting wrap, one voting piece. We've got Evan Perez. We've got possibly, if we can fit him, Dick Durbin on the hearing, but we'll see. And as I mentioned, Mark Court with his unmasking piece there.
And in the Situation Room, we'll continue to keep our focus on all things COVID, no green on the map, no part of the country escaping a surge, this push from the White House on herd immunity. We will dig into all of that with our medical voices, Sanjay, Tom Frieden, as well as our coronavirus wrap piece. We'll see if the president takes questions as he leads for his rally this afternoon. We'll also monitor President Obama's appearance on Pod Save America, see what news he makes there. We will also, of course, be highlighting with reporters, Jessica Snyder, I believe, as well as bookings, Andrew McCabe and others, the big nothing of the unmasking investigation, the Amy Coney Barrett hearings. We have Blumenthal booked to talk about what comes out of that today. Voting lines will be a big story for us as well. We have Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo booked to talk about the long lines Houston voters are facing. And we have a Dana Bash piece taking a look at whether or not Trump can repeat his success with rural voters in Pennsylvania. And that's where we start.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Hey, Jeff, it's David. I would just flag that. I think Amy Coney Barrett gave a couple of head-scratcher answers yesterday worth diving into a little bit, which is she equivocated on whether the president could move Election Day, even though it's Congress that has that authority. And I thought her back and forth with Amy Klobuchar about voter intimidation was also a lot of equivocation for someone who's supposed to be an originalist and a textualist. So maybe those are two things she should have written down in her blank notepad. But I think it's worth going back to those because those are strange answers to me. Okay. Yep. Other thoughts? Anyone else? Have a good day, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.